we're in this territory of concentration. Yeah. Better words, really better words for concentration, because we have so many associations to it, it's so cognitive, it's so push, it's so focused. Tranquility is one of the other words, and it captures the calming dimension of concentration. And that's really one of the, which is the factor that we practiced, we focused on last month, right? The calming factor. It is staying, it's learning to stay, but it's really staying and calming. It's staying and calming, yeah. Yeah, samadhi is another word for concentration. Samadhi. You've heard that word before. Yeah, sama means same, and adi means dominant. So that's attention is dominant, staying with one object, dominant with one, staying with one object in a dominant way, in a predominant way. Yeah. And it's really a gathering of the energies. It's really gathering of the energies. You've heard us say this. It's creating that that tripod for the camera. Yeah. So that we can see clearly and steadily what's going on in the mind. It's preparation for that. Yeah. And there are different kinds of samadhi. The most common one, and the most the one that we hear most about, is focusing on just one object, or as we would like to say, staying in the vicinity of one area or one object, in the vicinity of the breath. Yeah, staying with the breath, and then that's the most prominent. That's the most usual object with concentration. But there's also another kind of samadhi, which I'll mention here briefly today, which is called Khanika Samadhi. Khanika Samadhi. And Khanika Samadhi, Khanika, Khanika Samadhi, is momentary concentration on one object after another. Yeah. Just to say one thing about samadhi, the main thing to emphasize here is continuity. It's really continuity of attention. Is a simpler way to think of the development of concentration. It's the continuity. We have this expression, continuity is king. It has continuity is what is needed to deepen meditation, but also to deepen insight. And of course, that's a challenge for us, continuity. And samadhi is bringing that continuity so that we're not spacing out so much. And we, first of all, mostly cultivate that with one object, and notice that the mind doesn't stay. It wanders away and we come back. It wanders away and we come back. The Khanika Samadhi is allowing the attention to move from one object to another. Usually we'll start with just a couple of objects, but with less and less of a gap of mindlessness or scatteredness in between. Yeah. So the simplest way would be to take two objects such as the breath and sound, the two objects that we have talked about for concentration, the breath and sound. Well, it's possible to move the attention, or to notice the attention move from the breath to a sound. You can do that. You can do that intentionally as well, right? You can move the attention from one object to another. We do that all the time, but not with so much precision, but here, so suppose I were to move my attention now from the breath, sensations of the breath, to the sound, and back to the breath, and to a sound, yeah, and back to the breath, and to the sound. Now, if I were to do that in a way that there was not much spacing out in between, back and forth between sound and breath, between sometimes sound, sometimes breath, breath, sound, breath, sound, breath, sound. That would be a kind of Khanika Samadhi, where continuity, the attention is continuous, but it's moving quickly from one to another, from one object to another, right? Yeah, it's the continuity. So there's almost a seamless move from one object to another object to another object without spacing out so much. Yeah, with minimal spacing out in between. Yeah, and in that way, the mind can learn to become continuous with more than one object and a little bit more seamless. And it's another way to develop continuity. It's another way to develop continuity. Again, the common thread here is continuity. Okay. Yeah, it's the development of being able to staying and calming with some kind of continuity, either with one object or more than one object. Now, some people get confused when they're switching to Khanika Samadhi. So if you're getting confused with that and it feels like more effortful, just forget about it. Do you know what I mean? It's got to be much more natural and easy. We don't want to create stress by, oh, now I have to move from one object to another. The mind is already moving from one object to another, isn't it? Isn't our intention jumping around always from one object to another? Yeah. It's just about noticing that. In fact, one way that I like to think of Khanika Samadhi, this will date me and it will date some of you. If you remember this, back in the late 50s and in the 60s, early 60s, there was a show on TV. It was one of my first early shows. Once I moved one step beyond cartoons, yeah, and it was called Sing Along with Mitch. Now, some of you will smile when you'll remember this. Sing Along with Mitch. This Mitch Miller, who died just a few years ago at age 99, by the way, and he would get on 7:30 in the evening, one day a week, with his barbershop quartet, and they would sing in 4-part harmony some of the old favorites of the time. And what was interesting and unique, I think this should make a comeback. Well, maybe it is in karaoke. I guess it is in karaoke. But on the bottom of the screen would be the words of the song. Now, I was also learning to read. I mean, I was reading, but I was just learning, right? So were the words to the song. And there was a bouncing ball, a little like bouncing ball of light, like a little light ball, bouncing ball of light that would move from one word to another as Mitch and his team and his barbershop quartet were singing the song. So that enabled you to sing along with Mitch, hence the title of the show, Sing Along with Mitch. And I used to sing along with Mitch and I used to love it. It used to be one of my favorite shows. Khanika Samadhi is like the bouncing ball of light from one object to another object to another object of attention without spacing out. Right? So it's moving from one to another, to another, to another, to another, to another, to another, but in a kind of a tighter way, with fewer gaps of spacing out. That's the key to Khanika Samadhi. Eventually, at first there is more stuff going on in between, little moments of attention spacing out in between. And at some point, the mind is able to go a little more continuously from one object to another object to another object to another object to another object without spacing out as much, right? And so there's a kind of flow that starts to happen from one object to another, to another, to another, to another, to another. Yeah. And it's the kind of samadhi that can be super helpful also as we move into more daily life practice. Yeah. More daily life practice, where it's not going to be about just focusing on one thing. We've got to move. There's a lot going on here. We're driving. It's not about focusing on one thing. It's about starting to notice many things. And so it's important to see it as it's not such an esoteric and fancy thing, because in daily life, our attention is jumping around all the time. It's just that it's also spacing out a lot of the time. In between, it's jumping from one thing to another. It's also spacing out a lot, right? And so it's cultivating a way, and you can do this and simplify. You can slow down. You can slow down when you're doing one object and notice. For example, you close your eyes. That's what I do every day when I brush my teeth. There's a lot going on in there, right? Now, but I'll move from sensations, from sensations here, different kinds of sensations, and then there are also some sounds, right? And there's some feeling there. Yes, right. So there's definitely some feeling there. Sometimes there are visual images. Occasionally there's a little thought, and so the mind is kind of staying continuous, continuity from one thing to another, right? But I'm trying not to space out. I mean, planning to, no, I'm going to stay with it. But it's not staying with one thing. I'm not staying with the breath while I'm brushing my teeth, right? I'm staying with what's going on, one thing after another, with just staying with it, staying with it, staying with the movement from one thing to another, to another, to another. So it's a kind of a rolling samadhi from one object to another. And something else to explore, something else to play with. Yeah. It's also a way to work a little bit with the restless mind. When the mind's, moving, our minds tend to want to move from one thing to another. The problem is when we do that too soon, there's still a lot of spacing out going on there, right? And so we have to kind of keep it simple, keep it simple. If you're going to play with this, we always recommend starting with just two objects. I always start with breath and sound, and and eventually it can get a little bit more complicated. But we're such complicated creatures. We want to we want to get way more complicated way too soon. And part of this practice, such an important part of this practice, is simplifying, keeping it simple, But if you want to play with Khanika Samadhi, you could try moving between breath and sound, for example, or breath and other body sensations, or different places where you're feeling the breath itself. That's enough, because it's not so much the object, it's the continuity. It's not so much what am I paying attention to, it's how's the continuity going? Yeah, what's the degree of continuity that's happening there? No? Because that's what we want to cultivate. Calm and continuity, right? Yeah. Okay. So one more angle on concentration, and we can play with that a little bit. Okay? Yes. So let's enough for today. Good. Thank you for your attention. And let's open up. Let's open up together. And when you're ready, beginning to slow it down. Slowing down the movement, slightly closing the eyes. Maybe taking a few deeper than usual breaths, orienting toward comfort, more comfortable breath. then orienting towards settling, toward calming. And of course, the cultivation of the inner holding environment is, again, the beginning, cultivating samadhi right there, right here, staying in the vicinity of the breathing. And during this period of practice, if you would like to explore Khanika Samadhi, there are two ways that you could do this. One would be to move between breathing and sound, if there's a sound in your vicinity. Alternating between sensations of the breath and sound. Takes a little practice to move between two objects without it feeling kind of clunky. That's what happens at first. Another way, you can play with that. You can play with that for sure. Another way to do it is simply to notice that within the breath itself, as you're attending to it, there are a lot of different little sensations going on there, even in one breath, right? If you look a little bit more closely, just noticing the attention moving from between those various sensations, even within the breath. It's kind of like a bee and a flower. I'm moving, not leaving the flower entirely, but moving to different parts of the flower. It's like the attention moving to different parts of the breath, but without getting too distracted, staying in the vicinity with continuity. And what helps a lot in the cultivation of any kind of concentration, samadhi, is interest. In the last few minutes of the meditation, maybe settling back a bit more, keeping it simple and softening.